Falkville was not the kind of place where anyone expected to make national news. In 1973, the small northern Alabama town sat amid the farms and back roads of Morgan County, far removed from the places Americans associated with mysterious flying objects and visitors from other worlds. At night, once businesses closed and families settled into their homes, the countryside surrounding Falkville became genuinely dark. If something strange appeared on an isolated Alabama road after dark, the evidence of it might consist of little more than the word of whoever happened to be there, except perhaps if someone were to take photos of the strange and unusual. Photographs do not prove an alien, they do not prove a hoax, but they do prove that something stood in front of Jeff Greenhaw's camera in October of 1973. I am your host Hatter, along with
Scoot,
and welcome to Investigation. On Wednesday night, October 17th, 1973, Falkville Police Chief Jeff Greenhaw was at home. Greenhaw was just 26 years old and had taken over as police chief earlier that year in January. Sometime shortly after 10 p.m., he did get a phone call, and a woman was on the other end. A 1974 NICAP publication, which stands, I had to Google it, which stands for National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, describes her only as an unidentified woman who phoned Greenhaw.
that was a lot of words.
It is a lot of words. I was like, what is that? But yeah, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. Now, this woman phoned Greenhaw and reported that a UFO had landed near her home. This report did come out much closer to the actual event than later retellings, which do tend to differ. Some of them continue to describe her as anonymous, while some other accounts claim that she was a neighbor Greenhaw knew well. But we don't really know for sure. But either way, he got a phone call, said there was some flying object around her house, and she said she saw something unusual come down outside of Falkville. Depending on the source as well, she either described flashing lights, a flying saucer, or what she believed was a spacecraft. Greenhaw, obviously being police chief investigator, decided to investigate. Before leaving, he did grab something that would make this case famous: a Polaroid camera. Now, at the time, Polaroid cameras were unusual because they developed photographs within minutes, so if he did find anything, he wouldn't have to wait days for the film to be developed. And he grabbed it because he would often take it with him to use to snap mug shots of people. So it was pretty basic for him to grab that, his service revolver, and a shotgun. Put him in his car.
Fair enough.
Right. Greenhaw drove toward the area that the caller described. And once again, later retellings identify the location as a property belonging to a longtime Falkville resident, Bobby Summerford. But some contemporary accounts are really a lot less specific. The earliest surviving descriptions mention only that the reported landing occurred near the caller's home. We don't really know when or why Summerford's name was tied to the case, but it was at some point.
Interesting.
Yeah, a little bit weird, but it really doesn't even play that big of a part in the story. Regardless of the precise location, Greenhaw arrived expecting to find something.
Yeah.
He was looking for lights, an aircraft, a crowd, even a crowd of curious people trying to look at whatever object just fell.
I mean, understandably
right.
so. Yeah.
He was like, okay, I'm going to find something, but he found nothing. There was no metallic spacecraft, there was no people, there was nothing hovering overhead, no obvious evidence that anything had recently landed. Later accounts estimated that he searched for somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes before he moved on. It is important to note that he saw nothing because Jeff Greenhaw never reported seeing a UFO. The UFO belonged to the woman who called in her story. And that distinction is important for later on.
Okay. All right.
Greenhaw's story is something entirely different. So eventually, after searching, there was very little reason to remain in the area. he kind of was like, well, maybe she saw an airplane or just something a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Maybe whatever she did see was already gone.
Maybe it was a Nazi time machine.
Yeah, maybe it was a Nazi time machine.
Call back to an earlier episode.
Yeah, I think episode, it's either 14 or 18. Oh, it's 18, episode 18. Yes, go listen to that one if you haven't already. He even thought maybe somebody sent him on a wild goose chase. And you might be like, why would somebody do that? But October 1973 was not an ordinary month for UFO reports. Across the United States, and especially throughout parts of the South, reports of strange lights and unexplained aerial objects were making headlines with unusual frequency.
Why though?
Why though? I don't know.
Oh, just cause? Okay.
Just because. No, we're going to put a pin in that.
Oh, okay.
Now, whether that influenced what happened in Falkville is obviously impossible to know, but it does form an important backdrop to the events that follow. Now, with no evidence to investigate, Greenhaw returned to his patrol car and began driving along one of the narrow gravel roads just outside of town. For now, he kind of believed that the investigation was over. Then, he noticed something walking ahead of him. At first, he thought it was just a person walking. The figure was still some distance away, illuminated only by the headlights of his patrol car, and he could see 2 legs, a torso, 2 arms, and a head. There was nothing about its silhouette that immediately suggested anything unusual. Actually, according to one later retelling, Greenhaw did briefly wonder if it might be Bobby Summerfield Bobby Summerford coming out to investigate why a police car was on his property, which I think is probably when his name got tied to the story.
Oh, I bet so.
But some of the retellings do take a little bit of creative liberty with the story. So,
as they do.
Right. I mean, However, he continued forward, and as the distance closed, the details began to emerge, and something about the figure looked wrong. Its entire body reflected the headlights. Not just like a white shirt, not an occasional flash from a belt buckle or buttons. The entire figure seemed covered in an intensely reflective, shimmering surface. Greenhaw quickly realized that this wasn't the person he expected to find, and actually states in an interview conducted in 2005 that he thought it was an idiot. Like, he thought it was just some dumb person out on the road.
I love that.
Yeah. Later, he did struggle to describe exactly what he had seen. One description attributed to him compared the appearance to mercury rubbed over nickel, like a smooth, bright metallic sheen unlike ordinary clothing. He even says that when he was looking at it, it did resemble like aluminum foil.
Okay. All right. Let's grab our aluminum tinfoil hats, guys.
Yeah, get your tinfoil hats. I did watch a YouTube video about this case, and they were British, and so they said aluminium. And I was like, what the
yes, that's how they say it over there. It's just wild.
It tripped me out because everything I'm just like listening, and they were like aluminium foil, and I was like, the fuck is that? Just jokes. According to one source, the figure eventually approached to within about 10 feet of Greenhaw's patrol car, close enough that there was no longer. He could tell, like, it wasn't just some weird light in the sky. It wasn't like a shadow in the trees. He would step out of his patrol car and attempted to speak to the figure because, like he said, he thought it was just some idiot on the road.
Yeah.
He later recalls saying something to the effect of, "Howdy, stranger," which is iconic.
Love that.
Love that. In fact, the Birmingham News would later seize on that detail, publishing the story beneath the memorable headline, quote, "Falkville Chief says howdy to Spaceman."
I love that.
I was like, this man is an icon. He's a legend. It's great. Obviously, Greenhaw did not get a response from the figure. Instead, he just stood there. And for Greenhaw, he had no reason to believe that he was speaking to a spaceman.
Yeah, I mean, why would you?
Like, anybody would be like, you're a weird person in a costume, like a shiny aluminium foil costume. But he decided not to push his luck and try to talk to him further, and instead reached inside, grabbed the Polaroid camera he had brought, raised it toward the figure, and he pressed the button. For a fraction of a second, the darkness erupted into a brilliant flash of the camera. The figure was captured on film. Greenhaw snapped another photograph, then another, and another. 4 photographs in all. Those 4 images would become the most important pieces of evidence in the entire Falkville case. More than 50 years later, they are still being enlarged, analyzed, and debated by believers, skeptics, and investigators. Now, I'm going to send you them.
Picture time.
Picture time.
What am I looking at?
So that is the figure that he took a picture of on an old Alabama road and like at 10 p.m. That's what he captured. In 1973, mind you.
Wow.
Right.
It's got chicken legs.
It very much is like humanoid.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, the 4 photos, he gets like closer to him basically in each photo.
Yeah.
It is a very strange, there is something unsettling about them in a way. It's just like,
Let me see if I can make out a face or something.
yeah, there isn't a face.
I don't see a face.
No. It's a human-shaped figure. For our listeners, he kind of stands alone with like the dark woods behind him. He's covered from head to toe in an intensely reflective material, to the point where the camera flash sometimes washes parts of the figure out and other parts are like complete shadow. But the problem with the photos is that they don't like clearly show some sort of extraterrestrial like alien. It's just like a humanoid figure.
Yeah.
But it does show that Greenhaw ran into something.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem, the more important question though, is like who or potentially what is inside of that suit. It is something inside of a suit.
It definitely looks like something in a suit.
Yes, for sure. Now, if it was just a person wearing unusual clothing, they definitely weren't interested in talking. If it was something else, the being remained equally silent. So Greenhaw turned on his blue lights for his patrol car, and then he says he could see truly how reflective the material was. So he put his camera down, laid the photos on the console, and when he looked back up, the figure had already turned and was beginning to sprint away. Now, this is where it gets a little bit weird, because this is when his story shifts from just a weird encounter to like something a little bit extraordinary. Had the figure simply walked away into like the woods, it might have just been remembered as like weird pictures, but it didn't, because Greenhaw claimed that it moved in a way unlike anything he had ever seen. Its arms remained low against its sides rather than pumping back and forth like they would if somebody was running, and its upper body kind of rocked side to side, and Greenhaw said that its strides appeared unnaturally long. He actually compared the movement to somebody running on springs, bounding forward instead of taking steps or running.
Huh.
He jumped back into his patrol car and chased after the figure. Now, as he drove, it was on an uneven gravel road, so he could only get up to 35 miles per hour. And the figure continued to remain just ahead of the car. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know a single person that could run 35 miles per hour.
Or more.
Or more. A little bit weird. A little bit weird.
A little strange.
A little strange. Which it's also, like, to me, a really funny sight to picture in your head is just to see this, like, gleaming human-shaped figure being chased by a fucking cop car down a gravel road in the almost middle of the night in Alabama. Like, I was like, what the fuck? But he continued to accelerate, and so did the figure. Now, some sources do differ on the exact speed that he was going, but it seems like the general consensus is around 35 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And eventually the figure was gone, which we will come back to this. We'll put a pin in that.
All right.
Since we brought that saying. And just like that, the encounter was over. At least the encounter itself was over. So Greenhaw had begun in the evening investigating a report of a possible UFO, but he did not find one. He was left with something a little bit stranger, this Metal Man.
Yeah.
He instead had 4 photographs which were evidence. They did not prove an alien encounter, and they couldn't identify the figure, but they did prove that something stood in front of him.
Yeah.
So whatever the explanation ultimately would turn out to be, this was no longer someone's memory. We weren't relying on that anymore. We had photos that others could examine for themselves.
Mhm.
And Greenhaw wasted very little time telling anyone who would listen. Before the night was over, the strange events in Falkville were already beginning their transformation from a private encounter into a public story. At 11:30 p.m., Greenhaw had contacted the Decatur Daily, maybe that's how it's pronounced, at approximately 11:30, and which is also crazy because, like I said, he got this phone call at 10.
Yeah.
And by 11:30, he was already talking to a newspaper about the incident.
Yeah.
Whether he had misidentified just a person, or became the target of an elaborate prank, or experienced something genuinely unexplainable, his first public account wasn't recorded years later after the retellings. It was recorded within hours, so it was fresh in his mind. And what was also good at the time is that there was like no internet, there's no paranormal documentaries, there's not like 50 years of the story being retold and embellished and blown out of proportion and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
What he was reporting was what happened to him.
What he remembered.
Remembered.
Within like an hour.
Yeah. The editors immediately recognized that they had a story on their hands, and the ingredients were like irresistible for him, you know. Small Alabama town, police chief, weird phone call, strange figure. It was perfect. And the most important thing is they had the photographs that they could scan and copy. This would allow any readers of the newspaper to examine the figure for themselves. By the following day, Greenhaw's encounter had become news throughout northern Alabama. On October 19th, the Birmingham News carried its own account beneath the memorable headline, like I said, "Falkville Chief Says Howdy to Spaceman." And that is kind of pretty telling because, like I said, he did not ever say it was a spaceman.
No.
But that somehow got attached to his story because he reported the phone call. He said, like, I got this call saying there was a weird spacecraft. I went to check it out. I seen this figure. He never said, like, yeah, it was an alien. He said, I saw something.
Yeah.
I'll explain why that's important, but that's, like, really important for the story. Yet within 48 hours, the unidentified figure on a lonely Alabama road was becoming a spaceman in the public's imagination. The transformation had already begun, and the unexplained encounter was slowly becoming a legend throughout Alabama and starting to go elsewhere. When people looked at Greenhaw's photographs, they did not see the same thing. To some viewers, the images were astonishing. Those that were already convinced of the unexplained objects that were appearing across the country in October, the photographs seemed like evidence. But to many others that looked at the same pictures, they saw something completely different. They saw a person perhaps wearing aluminum foil, a homemade costume, some kind of protective suit, or unusual clothing. They thought it was a prank. Now, that distinction is important because there are actually two separate hoax theories surrounding the Falkville Metal Man.
Okay.
The first requires Greenhaw himself to be responsible. So some people think that he might have staged the entire event, that he arranged someone to dress as the figure, created a mysterious phone call, and then photographed the encounter himself. Why someone might do that? Maybe like attention, publicity, credibility. Who knows? I don't believe that one.
I don't either, personally.
Right, yep. I was like, eh. The second possibility is that Greenhaw is telling the truth, but somebody else staged the event. So somebody else made the phone call, put on a reflective suit, went out in the middle of the woods, and waited somehow for Falkville's police chief to come looking.
Mm-hmm.
Also a little bit weird. But more believable than him himself doing
Staging it, yeah.
But that does raise the question of, like, why would he be a target of that prank?
Yeah.
And also, because he himself thought that it was a prankster, it does make his greeting, the howdy stranger, make a lot more sense. Because if you were approaching an alien, you wouldn't be like, howdy stranger.
Yeah.
But if you were approaching some idiot that you thought was wearing a fucking aluminum foil costume, you'd be like, howdy stranger, you know? Like, it just...
Exactly. And honestly, looking at the photo, like, in my opinion, it kind of does look like some form of like extremely metallic, kind of almost like a hazmat suit type deal.
Yes, I agree. It does look like a a protective suit of some kind. And Greenhaw also thought that. He thought that it was some sort of prank, but it did change as the encounter continued because of the way that it ran and because of the speed it hit.
The way it moved.
Yeah. Then he was like, he still never claimed it was an alien, but he did say it was something weird.
It was, an unusual encounter of something.
Right. And if we actually revisit that chase, the car chase portion of the story, later versions of the Falkville story sometimes describe this chase as a simple contest of speed, but earlier accounts actually contain a detail that changes that, because Greenhaw did not necessarily just watch the figure just disappear into the darkness. According to the NICAP account, when Greenhaw accelerated after the figure, he was on loose gravel, so he actually lost control of the situation for a moment. His tires spun and he slid, which made dust fill the area. So he actually visually lost sight of the figure for a minute. And that's really all it would take for somebody to veer off and disappear into the woods in the middle of the night.
Fair enough. That seems pretty reasonable.
Right. But it still is like a weird thing for somebody to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't fully understand why somebody would
go
intentionally,
through these lengths.
Right,
yeah.
just to prank somebody. But, people are going to people, so who knows?
People are going to people.
Right. Now, he would also later describe the experience very simply and just say, quote, "It scared me to death." So the way that it moved and everything like that, it genuinely freaked him out. Regardless of what the figure actually was, his reaction was not one of somebody describing a joke. And because he believed that something extraordinary happened, and the town kind of did as well, but it didn't follow the same, like, oh my God, something weird did happen. It actually, it brought a lot of attention to Greenhaw, but it wasn't like an acceptance for him. For a police officer, credibility is obviously everything.
Of course.
And an officer's reputation depends on people believing that he can accurately observe events, evaluate information, and tell the truth about what happened. So the same newspaper coverage that made the Falkville story fascinating also made Greenhaw a very easy target for ridicule. His claims and his photographs of the Metal Man did bring a lot of accusation. People saying Greenhaw must have known who was inside. He repeatedly actually denied any sort of creation of a hoax. He passed away in 2007, and still up until that point, he said, "I had nothing to do with it. All I can say is that it was fucking weird," basically.
So I feel like at that point, you go to your deathbed saying you had no involvement. I think that he has no involvement.
Exactly.
Because at that point,
agree.
Why continue?
Right. Especially when it doesn't work out. If you created this hoax expecting to get attention out of it, and instead you're faced with very intense backlash.
Exactly.
Why hold on to it?
Exactly.
He actually had to move at one point. He moved out of the town. He did eventually return years later, but it was rough for him.
For it to get that bad, yeah, why would you...
Right.
If you faked it, why would you stick to it?
Right.
I don't think he did.
I agree. And even later, when he was talking about how the Metal Man looked, he said, it's kind of looks like he had aluminum foil on him. He's like, but I know it wasn't, because I went back and looked at the scene and there was no little pieces of aluminum foil. And I would imagine if you were to make an entire suit out of aluminum foil,
yeah,
stuff would tear off.
Because it's so thin.
And you're running.
Yes.
You're running through the fucking road. Stuff's gonna fall off.
Pieces of it are gonna fly off, yeah.
Now, because he did not turn into a celebrated figure, and instead this entire situation brought him controversy, suspicion, and even personal hardship, actually less than a month after the encounter, another newspaper story appeared, but this time it was about Greenhaw's job. So on November 16th, 1973, the same newspaper, the Decatur Daily, reported that Greenhaw had resigned as Falkville's police chief. Now, we can't say, obviously, that it was because of this, but it just seems very, literally, a month later, you have to resign from your job. It seems like it was a lot to do with the ridicule that he was receiving.
I mean, understandably.
Right. Now, another thing that kind of creates this, like, why the fuck would he do it himself story is one of the darker parts as well. Later accounts state that the house where Greenhaw lived was destroyed by a fire shortly after the encounter. Some versions go further, suggesting the fire was suspicious and even connected to the controversy surrounding the Metal Man.
That's crazy.
Right. Yep. Now, like, to play devil's advocate, obviously a fire can happen.
Yes, obviously.
But it was established to be a suspicious event, like a suspicious fire.
That's crazy to me.
Right. That's just shitty.
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't believe in aliens, you're gonna go burn somebody's home down?
Literally. Like, why go to that lengths?
Right. Now, his story brought worldwide curiosity and debate and criticism, and eventually that would also weigh on his marriage, and his marriage ended during the aftermath of the encounter. We can't draw a fully simple line. We don't know, maybe if there was other things happening.
Yeah.
But what happened with the Metal Man didn't help.
Oh, I'm sure it put a huge strain, I'm sure.
Right. And so from Greenhaw's perspective, the sequence of events is extraordinarily overwhelming. I mean, one night he's a young police chief, and then like weeks later he took some photographs on a road, and then he literally got his house burned down, he lost his job, and his marriage ended.
Yep.
That's a little bit of a weird trail of events to happen over just, even if it was just a hoax, even if it was just a prank, that is insane.
Yeah.
Now, because we have established, obviously, that he did take a picture of something, and in both of our opinions, it most likely was not him, like, his idea, his hoax. So then the question is kind of like, well, if somebody else created this, who wanted him to believe it and why?
Yeah.
The costume had to come from somewhere. Someone had to know where Greenhaw would be, and someone would have to make the phone call that started this all. So, the idea is that the Metal Man may not have been an extraterrestrial being at all. It may have been someone wearing protective equipment. A firefighter walking down Rural Alabama Road in 1973 would be weird, but reflective protective suits were real equipment long before the Falkville photograph spread. Firefighters and industrial workers, as well as aircraft rescue crews, used specialized garments designed to protect against extreme radiant heat. Their outer surfaces were covered with highly reflective aluminized material. In a normal circumstance, they would look like protective clothing, but in the darkness, illuminated by literally a camera flash,
Yeah.
it would look like some
Freaky
weird
thing.
Metal Man
Yeah.
standing there. The large protective hood could make it look like the head and neck could appear connected to one another. The viewing area in the hood could create the appearance of like a featureless face, and the reflective surface would scatter the light so intensely that the shape underneath would become difficult to recognize. It would also make the movements appear unusual. Because of the suit, they were bulky and they restricted movement. Someone running while wearing one might appear stiff and mechanical, even unnatural. Those details provides the fire suit theory some substantial base to stand on.
Yeah.
Because it explains, like I said, the movement and the reflective surface. But it's still not a complete explanation because no surviving suit has ever been identified as the one used in Falkville. There's no manufacturer that could confirm the exact garment. No physical evidence was ever recovered from the figure. So, even if the fire suit theory was there, it still didn't explain who was wearing it and why.
And what was the reason? Yeah.
Now, one of the strongest arguments that Falkville was a hoax came from the UFO investigation community itself. NICAP President John Acuff later stated that the participant had admitted the incident was staged. According to correspondence later cited by researchers, the person was reportedly a 17-year-old boy whose identity was withheld because he was a minor. The teenager was allegedly the person who dressed as the humanoid figure, And if accurate, that claim would dramatically change the interpretation of the case, because it would mean that the middleman was not a visitor from another world. It was just a person in a costume. However, the evidence surrounding this alleged confession is incomplete. The teenager could never be publicly identified. The confession itself is not even widely available for independent examination. And once again, Greenhaw had no idea that he was involved in this so-called hoax.
Yeah.
So what would be the point? Because even if the Metal Man was a person in a reflective suit, the prank required more than a costume. There was planning, but more importantly, someone had to make that phone call, which brings the mystery back to the beginning. The unidentified woman who contacted Greenhaw. Her identity remains uncertain in most of our surviving accounts. She just reported seeing a strange object, and she actually did make a reappearance. So in the interview that I previously mentioned, Greenhaw states that she did come forward and explain what she saw when an investigator from California came to investigate the story, but nothing else has been mentioned of her. So if it was a hoax and she was in on it, why would she come forward and be like, hey,
I saw something.
I'm the one who called him.
Yeah.
Greenhaw kept the photographs from that night. He actually kept them for about 10 years, almost to the day. Then, in 1983, he reported that the photographs had been stolen from his home, along with his firearms, including his service revolver and his shotgun, that were the only items that were with him in the car when he ran into this man. Somebody broke into his home and only took the items that were with him, including the 4 photographs. And he even states, he's like, I had these pictures so well hidden that only I knew where they were. I have no idea how somebody got into my home and found them and took them with them.
That's crazy.
That's freaky.
The government.
Well,
Oh no.
A police report was filed, and the town of Falkville's historical summary also records that Greenhaw reported the photographs stolen. So, like, this did happen. This can be traced. Now, who did it, why they did it, we don't know. But their loss created a major problem for anyone trying to evaluate the case, because the photographs that remain are reproductions. So they're copies upon copies upon copies. And every time an image is copied, printed, scanned, or even reproduced, information in the original photo can be lost. With the government thing, I didn't get the name of the facility, but within about, I believe it's 100 miles of where this took place, there is a government facility that seems to run research on things.
Oh.
So that is another theory, is that it was some sort of governmental experiment, somebody in this like high-tech powered suit, well, for, 73 high-tech, that he was out, he shouldn't have run into somebody, he did, that's why he ran. But which for me, I feel like makes the most sense.
It does make the most sense, because also explains why someone broke into his home and
stole
took only
photos.
the things, it took the photos, took the things that were on him that day.
Yes. Some other theories are that it was an alien robot scout, that like somebody, from another planet sent a scout to our planet. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that one. The only one that fully makes sense to me would be the government testing something.
Yes.
Or if it was a hoax, I can kind of see somebody trying to play a prank. I still don't know why you would hold on to that it was a prank for this long, or that it, like, what happened, instead of telling somebody, like, yeah, I was in on it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, even the one supposed account had all of these missing details, and it was like, I feel like if somebody came forward, even if they were 17 years old at the time, they're well old enough now to be like, yeah, I'm the one who was in the suit.
Yeah.
So, weird. But this is when we're going to get to the other encounters that were happening.
Oh.
So, it is incredibly interesting because after the newspaper stories appeared, Greenhaw reportedly began receiving multiple calls from other people claiming they had seen unusual things in the area. Suddenly, the Falkville encounter no longer existed as an isolated report. Other witnesses were describing strange lights, unexplained objects, and possible UFOs, possible spacecrafts. Newspapers were publishing about them, radio programs were talking about them. it was becoming a major public fad. On the flip side of that, because it did lean some support for the Metal Man theory, it also gives support for the hoax theory, because then some people are imitating it, things like that. However,
oh dear.
If someone wanted to frighten a police officer with a homemade spaceman costume, October 1973 would have been the perfect moment. Only 6 days before Jeff Greenhaw photographed the Metal Man on that Alabama road, one of the most famous alleged UFO encounters in American history had occurred just a few hundred miles away. The place was Pascagoula, Mississippi. On the evening of October 11th, 1973, 2 shipyard workers, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, were fishing along the Pascagoula River. Hickson was 42 and Parker was 19. According to their account, they heard a strange whirring sound and noticed an unusual glowing object nearby. They then claimed that 3 strange beings emerged from the craft. Their description was kind of the idea of like the small gray aliens or the small green aliens. They described very strange creatures that were reportedly 5 feet tall with gray wrinkled appearances and almost robotic movements. Hickson and Parker said that they were taken aboard the object and subjected to some kind of examination before eventually being returned to the riverbank.
They got probed.
They got probed.
I'm sorry, I can't help myself.
No, they got probed. Now, obviously the story sounds insane, but what made it different was after they reported the encounter to Jackson County Sheriff's Department, Hickson and Parker were questioned by authorities. Like many UFO reports, the first reaction from the investigators is, yeah, okay. So they thought, are they telling the truth? Are they playing a prank? They decided to leave the 2 men alone in an interview room while they secretly recorded them.
Smart.
Right. It's a very simple idea. If the story was invented, the 2 men would probably talk about how they were getting the publicity or whatever while they thought they were alone in the room. But according to those who reviewed the recording, that's not what happened. The 2 men continued to discuss the experience as though they were frightened and confused by what had happened to them.
Oh my goodness.
Right. Now, once again, this doesn't prove their encounter, but it does make it more difficult to just dismiss. Unlike many UFO stories, they continued telling the same basic account even when nobody believed was watching, and their story didn't change. It quickly became a national story. Newspapers across the country reported the claims, the idea of, strange beings coming down to Earth. But then within days, other reports began appearing. During October and November of 1973, UFO reports came from across the American South: Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, and Louisiana. In fact, this year became known as the 1973 UFO wave, where it's just like a ton of places were getting hit with UFOs.
Okay, all right.
Many reports involved strange lights in the sky. Some involved objects described as metallic, glowing, or unusually shaped. And if we actually look at a timeline, February to April of 1973, in Wayne County, Missouri, which was a little bit further away, but stick with me, there are hundreds of reports of unexplained lights that occurred in southeastern Missouri. Police, sheriffs, and newspapers reportedly received several hundred phone calls, and physicist Harley Rutledge later conducted a field investigation, and Missouri now officially recognizes Wayne County and Piedmont as its UFO capitals. August 31st to October of 1973, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and Louisiana, a concentration of UFO reports developed across the Southeast. NICAP's 1973 chronological... That was so many letters and so many words. Hang on a second. My dyslexic ass could not keep up.
Short-circuited for a second.
Yeah. NICAP's 1973 chronology records numerous sightings during this period, including reports by police and multiple witnesses. Then, October 11th is when we had the Pascagoula encounter in Mississippi. But on the same date as Pascagoula in Alabama, A 3-year-old boy reportedly told his mother that he had been playing with an unusual gray, wrinkled monster with pointed ears. NICAP's chronology specifically notes its proximity in both time and location to the Pascagoula incident. October 17th, near Dansville, Georgia, a motorist named Paul Brown reportedly encountered a silver oval object blocking or hovering over U.S. Route 29. The later case record says 2 approximately 4.5-foot beings in silver suits appeared beneath it. This is obviously pretty strange and intriguing considering we have a Metal Man in Falkville, Alabama. But its documentation is significantly weaker than both Falkville and the Pascagoula incidents.
Mm-hmm.
On October 17th, 1973, near Eupora, Mississippi, another cataloged report describes a large object hovering just above Highway 82 and a second object above that one. The witness reportedly described a bizarre humanoid or animal-like occupant. Again, this comes primarily through later UFO case literature. It's kind of, maybe that one. That was the only one that I was a little bit like...
iffy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other ones were pretty insane considering the time and how close they were to the Metal Man.
Yeah.
Which then also leads us on the same day, though, as the Eupora, as the one in Mississippi.
Just gave up.
Just gave up. Same day, though, is when we get Falkville, Alabama. So, did the events of October 1973 represent a genuine wave of unexplained encounters, or did the attention surrounding famous cases encourage more people to report unusual experiences? By the end of October 1973, the American South had become one of the major centers of UFO attention in the country. Small towns where people claimed strange lights appeared overhead, and they affected multiple people. I mean, we have police officers, fishermen, workers, and ordinary residents all found themselves connected by the same question. Were they witnessing something unknown? Or were they witnessing a moment when fear, curiosity, media attention, and imagination all collided? The Falkville Metal Man may have been a costume, the Pascagoula encounter remains debated, and the other reports are equally complicated. But together, they do create one of the strangest chapters in American UFO history. So what are your thoughts?
I definitely lean towards government, experiment type deal, because to me that logically makes the most sense.
Right.
But at the same time, since you mentioned that there was other similar anomalies
very similar ones,
other states, it's almost like, did he encounter something? Or because of the other anomalies going on in the other states, did someone try to recreate like a hoax?
Right, which is why I didn't spend a ton of time on the idea of the government facility. Because it does make sense, like, especially because if you take into account how fast the thing was running and how weird its movements were.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like just a regular Joe in a fire suit.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it's kind of like it does, if it was a hoax, it would make sense with all of the other encounters that somebody would be like, oh, but then there would be so many things that would have to line up.
Too perfectly.
Like somebody calling it in, some like being on the road that he just happened to drive down.
Yeah.
Like it does feel very weird. I'm not one to like super believe in aliens, which is kind of funny because like I believe in paranormal, but aliens I'm like, eh. Do I think that there's a high potential for them? Yeah. I mean, the universe is literally infinite. We don't know what's out there. This is one of the cases that I was like, when I look at the picture, my initial skepticism is like, that's a man in a suit.
Yes.
But when I read about his experiences and how Greenhaw never changes his story. And literally until his death, he maintained the same experience. It's a little more like, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take into these other accounts, a lot of them describing a silver suit, the pointed ears. And when you look at the picture, it does look like there's some sort of point on the ears. There's some sort of like antenna above the head. It's like, okay. It's a little bit stronger. It's a little bit stronger of a case for an alien.
I agree.
Which is really funny because one of the videos that I watched on the case, actually, they had the opposite conclusion. They were like, I don't think it's an alien. I think it's a government facility. But they just covered the Falkville case. They didn't cover the surrounding issues.
Yeah.
But it's like, you can't really cover just that when these other things are so close to it.
Yes.
It's kind of like
happening around the same time.
Yeah, it's like when you were talking about the Flatwoods monster.
Yes.
And like, yeah, they were a little bit spaced out, but they were like the same descriptions from the same area.
Mm-hmm.
So, weird, for sure.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Go check out our Patreon. We've just started it. If you want some extra like bonus content, we got it pretty relatively cheap for you guys. Yeah. So go check that out. But don't go too far because we'll catch you in the next investigation. Bye.
Bye.